Welcome to Deer Talk Now. More importantly, Merry Christmas. Hey, this week we're having the podcast, but next week, due to the holiday, we are not. So the next one will be on January 8th. Be sure to tune in there. Today, we're all talking about winter survival and whitetails. Especially as a hunter, what can you do? You know, some of us live in states where you really cannot feed or supplement feed your animals throughout the winter. And that's the case here in Wisconsin. So what do? You got to plan ahead, right? So for you guys that planned ahead, you want a good winter source of feed. And that can be either turnips, soybeans, the list goes on and on. Corn, corn's good in that up here. If you got deep snow, the corn's still standing so they can still get at it. One little helpful tip that I'm going to talk about for turnips in the deeper snow is utilizing your ATV and a plow. What we found out is if your food plots froze and you have a foot or a foot and a half of snow, rather than make those deer work for your food plot, right? I just go plow out lanes, and I'll plow one lane and then bring the ATV back to the house. The next week I plow another lane, and what it does, it's kind of funny. It hits those turnips and they pop out and they're froze solid, and literally it pulls them all out of the ground and kind of like lays out a little furrow. So it's almost like I am feeding them without feeding them because it is in a food plot. And I don't know if the DNR would consider that baiting or not, but it's after the season. We're not doing anything. All I'm trying to do is make it easier for the deer to eat something. Another thing as a hunter can do, one of those issues that you need to plan ahead on is thermal cover. If you don't know what thermal cover is, just picture evergreens or something that holds in the heat. A lot of places in the Midwest, especially, and places have great hardwoods, right? But they don't have that thermal cover, and you need thermal cover if you want to hold your deer for the entire year. Because what that does is it's a warmer area. It keeps the deer out of the elements, wind, snow, and they're going to gravitate towards these areas. I own, fortunately, a cedar swamp, a tamarack swamp, and it's got great thermal cover. And it's so interesting this time of year is to see the deer that show up. I mean, we'll get deer that I've never seen before from a mile away, and they'll winter on our place all winter long. What's really cool about that is if you created this perfect area for your whitetails where you have food and you have security for them and you have that thermal cover and you got a water source on it and then low intrusion, right? Low human presence. A lot of times, especially if it's a mature deer, a 4 or 5 year old, he's going to take note. Like, this is a great spot. I'm the king here, and he's going to come in. He's either going to live there and move over, or he's going to check it out during the rut because they're going to remember those two things. Now, let's talk about the areas where you can feed whitetails. In areas you can feed, there's a couple no-nos. One is don't wait until the last minute and start feeding your whitetails, especially if you start feeding them alfalfa or hay or that sort of product where you're throwing out in a bale. You might think you're doing a fantastic job and you're feeding a bunch of whitetails, and you'll see them in there. They're going to be eating it. Unfortunately, the whitetail's digestive system, it literally changes by the season. So if they're not used to eating alfalfa and they're utilizing more browse and that kind of feed, those enzymes are built in their stomach to really contain the browse or break down browse, which is a woody substance, right? It's not used to the alfalfa. So all the enzymes in there used to break it down are not similar to alfalfa. Therefore, the deer eats alfalfa and it can still starve to death. It's really sad because the deer's stomach is full, but they're not being able to pull out those nutrients like they are from the browse because their stomach's set up for browse. That said, if you start feeding them alfalfa this time of year and you continue feeding them alfalfa, their stomach's going to have those right enzymes in it. It'll be continually able to break down that, and therefore they're going to survive. If I live in a baiting state, I'm going to do two things. I'm probably going to put out a corn feeder as well, because corn is pure carbohydrates, right? In a whitetail in the cold burns lots of calories, and that's what the carbohydrates are good for. If you really want to have a good, solid feeding program, you're also going to put protein in there, right? So that way you can maintain that body mass and build up muscle as the whitetail continues. Plus, you're going to have the carbs to really fend off the cold weather. And that feeding program, what it's going to do for you, it's super cool, is that your deer are going to go into the following year, spring, in good shape. They're not going to be run down. They're going to be able to, have the proper body mass. So your bucks, everything they're eating is going into their antlers. Where if your deer do survive, let's say you cannot feed them, you couldn't really do anything, deer are likely to survive, right? They're going to come out of winter, they're going to be extremely skinny, but they're going to pack on as much green food as they can. They're going to eat the protein. Well, what happens is all that food is really going into replenish the body. It's not going into the antlers. It's not going into the fawns. It's trying to maintain the host, in a healthy environment. Therefore, it literally is going to take away from your antler growth. I always tell people here in the Midwest, if we have an early green up with a mild winter, it's going to be a great year for antlers. And this year, literally, it was one of those years. We had one of the earliest green ups that we've ever had in 2025. We also had a winter that was very, very mild in the fact that we barely had any snow or cold. And our whitetails came through in flying colors. This year, I don't predict that. We've had early snowfall, and it's been cold. And when I say cold, I mean, 10 degrees, 0 degrees, and lots of wind. And you can see right now, we actually had an early snowfall. It was deep snow. I mean, it was probably a foot of snow on the ground. But we were fortunate that we had a warm up just a week ago. And a lot of that snow was melted down here in the farm country, which is really nice because now we have bare spots out in the fields where the whitetails can still get some food or easily find those soybeans that were left by the farmer or the corn that was left by the farmer, or even eat some of your clover or alfalfa that's still left, including my turnips. So therefore, it's an easier source when they don't have to work for it as hard. They're not burning as many calories. Again, it's a good thing. In deep snow, like I said, you got to figure out two things. One is, what you're going to feed the deer, if you can feed them. Two, how do you make their life simpler? We've done several things throughout the course of multiple years to help our whitetails survive. One of those things was giving them that thermal cover closer to the outside, or planting food closer to the thermal cover. And what that's done is it literally keeps those deer where they really don't have to get up and expend much energy in the winter. All they have to do is get out of their bed, walk 100 yards, eat as much as they want, and then bed down. In Wisconsin, when we used to be able to feed them, it was so cool because you would have literally deer that you could see just waiting for you to dump out your corn. And here in Wisconsin at the time, we could only dump out, I don't know, it was like literally a third of a pail or less of corn. But the whitetails knew when we were feeding them. So you guys that are on a feeding, that's the other key part of it. If you're feeding the whitetails, continue to feed them because they're going to be reliant on that. Now I want to talk about one more thing that really threw a wrinkle into our food plot strategy this year as we were hunting were the wolves. So if I lived in an area like Wisconsin or Minnesota, northern part of Minnesota, or any of the other states where you had predators, I'm probably really going to monitor my food feeding stations because the predators are going to gravitate towards those areas, right? You're bringing in a huge number of deer. You're making their life easy. They're going to start hunting around those. So in areas like that, I'm either going to spread out more feeding stations so that the deer have several options, or I'm probably going to avoid feeding the whitetails altogether because the last thing I want to do is concentrate these whitetails in a small area, have deep snow come in, and have the wolves decimate the herd. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever hunted in an area that had wolves or not. My area is relatively new to it, but I can tell you I got to go wolf hunting last year in Ontario. And it's a different type of hunt. You're sitting over a pond or a small lake, and they got a bait pile out there 200 yards, and they'll tell you the wolves are probably the smartest animal out there. They can tell if there's any kind of heat or it smells different or any sound that's not relative. They probably won't come out. So anyway, hunt was brutal. It was probably right around zero, high wind chill, snowed, miserable, and I did see a wolf, but I did not make the best shot. So we had to track that thing. And I can tell you this, we did not see one deer, moose, any kind of big game animal track other than wolves, and we went a little over 3 miles in the bush. So what does that tell me? It tells me areas that do have the food are literally getting decimated by the pressure of wolves. They're eating all the all the whitetails out of there. They're pushing the moose into other areas where there are not wolves. So it just, the red flag went in my brain. And then this year where we started seeing wolves, it really did change things. What was interesting on the wolves too is our mature deer, not the does so much, or immature bucks, would stay there when the wolves were in there. My mature deer totally would vacate when the wolves were on my property. And by that I mean, like, you were getting picture of big deer, and all of a sudden you'd swear he was totally nocturnal. No, he just left, because we have land in 2 different areas, and a lot of times they'd just show up in the other area. When those wolves would switch spots, they would come right back. So it told me 2 things. 1, they're smart enough to leave. 2, they know when the wolves are there and just do not want to deal with them, so they just vacate. The wolves, if you have a pack, if you guys don't know how they hunt, they literally separate, and they're smart enough to try to drive deer into areas where they can either attack them as a pack, or they're going to find the weak, wounded deer, and here after deer season, they are a little bit of that. We made a poor shot this year and it wasn't really that much of a poor shot. It was just extremely cold, and my son was doing some doe management, and one of the does got up after he had shot it and went in the woods, and I made the mistake saying, we'll just find it in the morning. Totally forgot about the wolves, and they decimated it. I mean, basically they ate that thing, pulled it apart, took the parts where you didn't even find anything but a little bit of the skull and a little bit of bones that were left. Other than that, they took it all out of there, which was kind of curious, because in the past we've had a ton of coyotes right in that same situation. We would have found the whole deer. It would have probably been 8. The stomach would have been 8, maybe 1 ham, but we would have still salvaged something. With the wolves, they literally pulled it apart and left with the area, so I'm sure to get it into thicker cover where they're not going to be exposed. So the biggest thing that I can tell you as a hunter is really plan ahead when you're feeding your whitetails. Come up with a game plan that's going to work for you. If you're blessed to live in a state, like I said, where you can feed, there's 2 different options on feeders. You can use either a gravity feeder, which will hold, down in Texas, they hold those big hoppers, thousands of pounds. And you really could put 1,000 pounds in there and never have to check it again. Or you can use spin cast feeders. In there, Moultrie's got a pretty cool system out there where it's literally almost like a cell cam, right? Now it's a cell feeder where you can check your feed levels. It'll tell you if it's jammed. These are all things when you're a non-resident hunter that you have to worry about when you can't get to that feeder quickly. So it makes kind of your feeding simple. But I love the gravity type feeders because the deer can eat what it wants. Unlike a lot of other animals, cattle, dogs, and some of those other things, the whitetail really only eats till it's full or knows what they need, and then they'll leave.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Mossberg. Mossberg has been supplying American hunters with quality firearms for over 100 years. Over the years, they've upheld their commitment to innovation by creating a handful of firearms that have shaped the way we hunt today. For more information, visit mossberg.com.
It's kind of, if you guys have ever run protein feeders, it's super cool to see a whitetail. You'd swear, if I use protein feed all winter or all summer long, I'm going to go through thousands and thousands of pounds of feed, and depending on your situation, how big your ranch is and everything else. But literally a whitetail will come into it, and the guys that I know put a protein feeder relatively close to their food plots. That whitetail will come in, eat a little bit of the protein, and then gravitate back into the plots. And why is that? Because a whitetail loves to diversify what they're eating. They understand they're eating some protein. It's good for them. But they also like to eat clover or soybeans or any of these other food sources. And that's why when we're planting food plots for the early part of the season or mid-season, I like to use those, what I call buffet type plots that have multiple plantings in there. Now, thinking late season here, make sure when you're using a blend of plots that's going to or seeds that's going to get you through the entire season, and I'm talking a blend that has like Australian winter peas in it, cereal grains, and those are rye or winter wheat, oats. All are great, right? But I still like to make sure there's some kind of brassica in it that's going to have a bulb. Either radishes, Darkonian radishes are great. Purple top turnips are good. Any kind of turnip, you want to have that bulb, and it wants to stick out of the ground, because if the roots are all in the ground, the whitetail's going to have a hard time getting at it, and it's going to make it harder for them to feed. And honestly, they're going to spend so much energy trying to get that bulb out of the ground that it kind of defeats the purpose. I'm just going to give you a little bit of review. So a couple things that you can do is, remember, try to keep the snow down on those plots. You may have to, if you're just worried about a winter food source, you may have to fence in that area to keep it for the season. Because when it's cold and the weather turns right, and you got the preferred food source, you're not just going to have your deer, you're going to have all your neighbors' deer. This year we had a perfect example of that. We had a 2-acre bean field, almost 3-acre bean field, and they look perfect. I mean, they're knee-high, full of pods, and during the rut through even firearm season, which is Thanksgiving weekend, there was a few deer that were in there all the time, 10, 11 deer. As soon as it turned bitter cold and the snow dumped, every whitetail in the area was in that food plot. My son sat there one night. We had 57 whitetails in that food plot before dark. How many came after dark? I don't know, but I can tell you this: they ate 3 acres of beans in basically a week. So that is literally tons of food that those whitetails ate in that short amount of time. So if you do want to protect your food plots, you may have to put a fence on those. Electric fence, there's a way to do it. You can look it up online, but long story short, use a solar panel, a fence or electric fence, run the wire, 2 wires, one's a little higher, one's low. And the theory is when the whitetail jumps up, they hit the second fence, bolt out of there, and it works. I'm just telling you, it's not that hard to do. It's super easy to get up, and it will protect your food plots. Just be ready for a rash of whitetails once you take the fence off. So there's a strategy that you could actually use during the season as well. Yeah, like if you have a preferred food source and it's close to your firearm spots, protect those areas and then take down that fencing right before the season. Deer are going to gravitate towards those areas, and literally you'll see tons of whitetails in there. That's basically what I have on the food plot strategy as far as what you can do for feeding as well. There's great companies up there. Record Rack has a great protein feed. Antler King has a great protein feed. There's multiple other companies. Rack Fuel, they absolutely love their protein feed. All of them are high in protein. I like some of the Antler King. I like the Rack Fuel blends that not only add, the higher protein sources, but they also have the carb load. It's kind of giving the whitetail a balanced nutrition because they're going to use those carbs and burn that up. But you can plant, if you have to, just use basic corn. It's going to keep your whitetails alive. The protein's going to withhold or maintain their body mass a little bit longer, which if you're really worried about records or racks the following year, you're going to want to keep that protein level up as well. Proteins are more expensive, so it's really up to you as a hunter how much money you want to invest in feeding your whitetails. But the best part of it, I'm going to give you this last advice. If you can put that feeder or spot where it's close to those, like I told, thermal cover, but also close to where you can actually view the whitetails, there is nothing better than watching the whitetails feed, either on your food plot or on a feeder, and they're right there. You're going to get to see the complete interactions. Not only that, plus they may drop a few shed antlers right there in your hunting spot, honey hole, and you can find some easy shed antlers. For whatever reason, I'm not that lucky. If you're doing a food plot for winter or feeding for winter, turnips are great, right? Because they got to work for it a little harder. A lot of times they're using their hooves to try to beat at that turnip. And when they're doing that, sometimes they'll hit their antlers. So turnip plots are a great way to find shed antlers. And in some states, you can legally do what they call an antler catcher, which is basically they'll put up around your feeder, you'll put up either a fence where they have to jump in and out, and a lot of times that jumping will be enough shock to drop the antlers when they're ready to come off. And I've seen other people use even bungees in there closer to the feeder where the whitetail's antler gets kind of caught in the bungee a little bit. When they pop it off, it just pops them out. If they're not ready to come off, it literally will, the antler just pulls through the bungee cord and remains intact. Another thing that you can do in the state of Wisconsin, unfortunately, we can't use any of that stuff, nor can we feed. So for me, it is turnips trying to get the shed antlers as well. When it comes to thermal cover, you're literally trying to create a canopy where the heat can't escape. So it's going to be time consuming, right? So you can plant a number of different pine trees or cedar trees in an area, or you can literally use like a lower area in the swamp, thicker in the interior, and try to create some sort of cover. You can do that with hinge cutting trees, which hinge cutting trees is basically cutting your tree off 5 or 4 or 5 feet up in the air so it drops down. Again, you're just trying to give that whitetail a little bit of cover where it could bed down underneath this stuff, and the wind can't get at them, the elements can't get at them. And when you create these, you'll know right away if you're successful or not, because there are going to be beds everywhere. Steve Bartell is a master at creating buck bedding areas. I'm just happy to keep the deer in a certain area. So again, if you use hinge cutting, which is more immediate, if it's a long-term strategy, let's get some pine trees planted. You can use white pines, spruce, whatever. You just want to make it thick enough where they grow, where it creates a canopy over the whitetails where they can bed kind of underneath that stuff. It's just a great way to keep deer on your place. So if you're really trying to make the ultimate farm, right, here are the elements that I think to make the best of the best. You want some hardwoods on there, right, especially oaks if you have them. If you do not have them, you can plant them. It's a long-term strategy, right? I want my thermal cover. My neighbor did this, and it's actually, I didn't really look at his place closely until we helped him with a box blind. And what he did is he put smaller areas of thermal cover, pines, but then on the edges, he kind of, rather than use edge feathering, he planted oak trees, and there it'll go oak, apple tree, oak, apple tree, and he did that all the way around the outside. And literally he took a wide open farm field and made it into whitetail habitat, because now I can watch those fields. And then he planted them, like the field, it's probably a 40-acre field is what he did it out of. And then he has probably 10 acres of pines here and another 10 here and another 10 there. And what he did is create 3 or 4 different bedding areas on his property that the whitetails literally live in there, and they come out all day long. And it's pretty cool because I can see them from my house, and they're up on a hillside that's probably quarter mile, half mile away, and those whitetails will feed on those hidden fields all day long. I mean, you talk about a spot. We watched mature 9-point come out of it on a weekend at 11 a.m. and he literally came out. It wasn't just dogging a doe. He ate with a doe, so he was actually tending her, ate out in this field during the middle of the day because, one, nobody's bothering him, right? So that's the security, nobody's interaction, not a lot of humans. 2, he has got a great bedding area all the way around. 3, they put a pond on there, so he had a water source right there as well. And this spot literally connects my ground with a neighbor's ground with my ground again, and those deer are using it, even in the transients that are just following it, are using it as a corridor. So around every one of those oak trees, huge scrapes. I'm assuming they would be there because I know my place that butts up to his, we put a 4x4 post in and have a licking branch on there with a rope, and the deer just absolutely hammer that thing. So I know on his, where they have the natural scrapes as well. Again, it's just a great way to maintain your whitetails through the winter by making sure that they have these spots to stay warm, stay out of the wind. It's no different than you. Think about this when you're outside. If you're in the wide open, or if you're in a wide open woods, right, you can still feel the wind. You can feel the cold. When you're in a thick canopy of trees, right, it's always a little bit warmer. The wind's not going to get to you, and that's what you want to do for your whitetails. You just want to give them a spot where they can maintain their body heat. It's secure for bedding. You don't have to worry about other people interacting with them. And that's the other thing, guys. When you have whitetails that are wintering on yours, don't push them, right? Don't go shed antler hunting every month in January or every weekend in January or February. Wait until the majority of your bucks have dropped, because you don't want to put any additional stress. I have neighbors that coyote hunt with dogs, and they're always like, why don't you let us on yours? It's just a coyote. I don't want to put the stress of having a dog running through my bedding area. And I know it's good to get rid of coyotes, but I also know that's stressful on the whitetails. I'd rather go out there with thermals and shoot my coyotes. So there's a lot of things that you can do to make your whitetail more secure in the place that they're living and healthier throughout the winter. Those are just a couple of them. Well, that's it for this edition of Deer Talk Now. Join us in 2 weeks, January 8th, for the next week's show.
The Deer Talk Now podcast is brought to you by Mossberg, Wildlife Research Center, Traditions Firearms, Outdoor Edge Knives, Hoyt Archery, and 10 Point Crossbow.